So, okay, in university, all of my friends were applying for like 40 different internship positions, and I applied to one, and I got it. So, here's how that happened, and like what I learned about interviews along the way. I think it's going to be helpful for you too, because there's some interview advice here that I don't really hear being said, but I feel like is very true. So, listen to see if you agree and if you get anything out of it. So I was in business school, and we had this thing called a co-op program, which helps you get internship opportunities. All of my friends were applying to like, 40, 50, 60 different jobs, but I literally only applied for one. There was this like early round where only capital markets related jobs were being posted. And I didn't even want one of those jobs. I had just worked a capital markets job like the prior year, and I absolutely hated it. So I wanted to like transition and try something new. But one of my friends was like, bro, just apply for one job and like see what happens. And for some reason I agreed, and I was like, all right, fine, let me see if there's something I wanted. And I did think about transitioning into more of like a strategy consulting role. And there was one job there called like capital markets, like strategy and advisory, like analyst. So I just applied for that one because it sounded the most similar to consulting. So I got the interview because I had relevant experience. And there were 3 questions during the interview that I think like really changed everything around and made me the top candidate by far. And I felt that these 3 questions did it because I saw this like very obvious reaction from like my future boss and interviewer when he heard my responses to these. And I think there was such a kind of visceral response because my answers were so different from what you normally hear. So he started off by asking me like a question that he maybe shouldn't have been asking, which is like, what other jobs are you applying to? I literally told him like, this is the only job I applied to. And then his face was kind of like, huh? He was really curious, and he asked me like, why is this the only job that you applied to? I told him like, this is the only job I applied to because I really wanted to move away from like a pure like capital markets analyst role, and I wanted to like go more into like strategy and advisory, and I was also interested in consulting, and this was the only job during the capital markets round that had anything to do with that. So this is the only job that I was interested in. And after I said that, I saw that he was kind of like nodding along and starting to like really get engaged with me. So why do you think that you would be the best for this job? Here, I gave a very atypical answer. I said, maybe I'm not. How can I know if I'm the best for the job? I don't know any of the other candidates. Here's why I think that I'd be pretty good at this job, right? So, and take it or leave it. I think that I have the relevant experience, I have the interest, and have the natural talent to do the quantitative parts of this job and also the qualitative parts of strategy and advisory. And then like I just immediately got that job, and that's the job I worked. The end of the story is I didn't even like working that job because it was still capital markets, and I don't like capital markets. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is I think that this was kind of a unique experience because I gave answers that were very different from what people would normally give. I impressed somebody probably the most I've ever impressed them in an interview before. And I want to kind of decompress why this happened. And there's going to be advice that comes out of this analysis that I just don't hear from interview advice. Let's talk about a framework for like what makes for a good interview. And it's really like boiled down to 3 things. Number 1, am I going to have a good relationship with this candidate? 2, are they going to be competent at the job? And then number 3, like, are they going to actually stay at this job? Like, is there a good chance that this intern is going to turn into a full-time, or this full-time is going to stay on for like multiple years and not just leave after like 6 months? And here's why my answers hit those 3 things so well. For relationships are mostly about like, number 1 is trust, and then number 2 is like likability. The big mistake that people make when it comes to earning trust in interviews is they're trying to like exaggerate and bluster what they are. You can't show any weakness. You have to convince them that you're the best. And that's just like not true. Because people are forgetting that interviews are really just conversations between people. And whenever you put up a facade and a front, it makes it harder to actually connect on a human level. It's harder to create a relationship. And the thing about trust is that it's built on honesty, not on hiding. A lot of people during interviews want to hide things about themselves, but the people that can actually have the confidence to be like legitimately honest with the interviewer, it's going to be a breath of fresh air because they're going to sense honesty, and that's what you need to make a good relationship. The other thing is, would you rather be friends with somebody who's like arrogant or with somebody who's more humble and down to earth? Right? And that's the likability aspect. Here's the second thing about competency. Competency is comprised of like intangibles and tangibles. The tangibles are obviously like what's your past experience, what are your grades, quantifiable things. Intangibles is also very important. Like the tangibles will get you to the interview, and then the intangibles are really what mostly happens during the interview. And the intangibles is mostly just sensed not based on like how smart your answers are, but more based on your energy. Like everybody's heard of the saying, people don't remember what you say, but they remember how you said it. A lot of people going into the interview, knowingly or unknowingly, give off like this aura of desperation. You can kind of sense when somebody's desperate because they are desperate. They're thinking like, I need to get this job or I'm screwed. If that's your mindset, it's going to bleed through into your voice. And that's what I've noticed for myself and for other people. And what was different for me during this interview is that I was not desperate at all. I actually gave off the energy of like self-assurance because I legitimately did not even want this job probably. And I was totally willing to apply for other jobs. So when I went into it, I showed up completely differently than how I would show up for like a job I'm desperate for. And when I was giving my answers, I was just saying them like matter-of-factly, without blustering, without exaggerating, without hiding. And that came off as like, oh, this guy is confident because, and confidence equals competence. And obviously this is not a one-to-one, but this is how humans read each other. This is how impressions are created, right? Confidence equals competence, and like desperation equals like zero ability. And then the number 3 thing is like longevity. How long is this candidate going to stay at this company for? How interviewers tell how long like a candidate is going to stay here for is like, does this job fit into the story of their career? Does it fit into their life story? Do they have a coherent story about why this job makes sense for them right now? You don't have to convince them that you're going to stay here forever because that's not realistic, right? Like most people, especially our age, don't really go out and stay at a company forever anymore. So you just have to convince them like, does this actually make sense for you? Like, do you actually want this? And I clearly showed them I wanted it because it's the only job I applied for. Clearly made sense because this role was kind of unique within capital markets, that it was more strategy focused. And I explained why that was like completely sensible for me to go after.